Hey everyone, and welcome to this Risky Business product demo. My name, of course, is Patrick Gray, and I'm joined today by Eoin Hinchy, who is the founder or co-founder. I can't remember, Owen.
Both.
Both. All right. So I just wasn't sure if you were a sole founder, but Eoin Hinchy from Tynes, and Tynes, of course, is a automation company that people rave about. One of the reasons that we asked Tynes to be a sponsor on the Risky Biz podcast is just because so many people had raved to me about how it had made their lives infinitely easier. So Owen's here to actually give us a walkthrough of the product. But Owen, why don't you give us your best elevator pitch for the Tynes product?
Absolutely, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me. I never get tired hearing kind things said about the company and the product. So as you said, my name is Eoin Hinchy. I'm the founder and CEO of Tynes, and we're building the world's easiest and most powerful automation platform. Simple as that. The reason we're doing that is because I spent about 15 years as a cybersecurity practitioner, primarily ops roles like incident response, security engineering, security management at companies like eBay, PayPal, and DocuSign. And throughout my careers as a practitioner, pretty much every problem that I experienced, 201, was directly related to either too much work and not enough staff, one or the other. And as we all know, automation is a really good answer to both those problems. Not the only answer, there's no silver bullets here, but it's a really, really good answer. If you're automating away 99% of the routine work in your security program, you've got more time to spend on more impactful, more fun, more engaging work. Now, why does Tynes need to be powerful and easy to use? So we're obviously not the first people to realize that automation is a good answer to some of these problems. There's been loads of automation platforms before us. However, we are the first product, I believe, to recognize that for a tool like this, a product like this to actually work, it needs to be both extraordinarily powerful in that it can handle any use case, and it needs to be exceptionally easy to use. So you don't need to have a software engineering degree. You don't even have to know how to write code to get value from the product. And so the reason we've gotten so much traction is because we're super powerful, works with any use case, stack agnostic, works with any possible combination of technologies, and it can be used by the most junior people on the security team.
I mean, look, from what I've heard about other automation solutions over the years, I mean, there's automation components baked into existing security products, and they might be very good at doing one or two things, which is great. But the platforms that try to do wider automation, you haven't typically heard good things about them. They're buggy. They can only do some things well. They're very complicated to set up. You need to have deep product expertise to try to do it, or you need to sort of change the way that you actually run your business in order to sort of tailor it for the automation solution. Like, that's the feedback that I historically got. And I mean, that's really what you've set out to address, right?
Bingo. I should have let you do the pitch, Patrick. Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're trying to build here is a platform that's very opinionated about being unopinionated, right? You can use this product any way you want. We're not going to force our way of doing things down your throat. What we're going to do is provide this platform that's powerful, robust, easy to use, scalable, and secure, but is critically designed to work the way you're already working.
All right. Well, why don't we jump into the demo now? And I think you've told me before we started recording about what you're actually going to show, and you're going to show us a couple of really common use cases. One bog stock standard, and the other one slightly more exotic. And then you're going to show off actually a new feature that enables you to turn some of these automation workflows into apps, right? Which I haven't seen it yet, but I'm actually legit interested to see what that looks like. So yeah, why don't you kick us off with the phishing automation case? Because it's my understanding that like phishing automation, anytime I talk to anyone who works on an enterprise security team, like, it's such a big part of their job is doing phishing remediation. Not only is it such a big part of the job, but it's universally a part of everyone's job that they hate. So I've seen people do automation in a sort of duct tape way, with this stuff like kicking things into sandboxes under certain circumstances and doing this and doing that. But I understand yours is designed to be pretty flexible. So yeah, please show us.
Awesome. Great introduction. So The page that we're on here, this is Tines, this is our application, and the page that we're on here is called the Storyboard. And this is where our customers spend 95% of their time. This is where you build your automated workflows. So every single box that we see on the screen in front of us here is a different step in your workflow. And the different colors represent the different types of step that you can take in Tines. Now, Tines is super, super easy to use, right? You're going to take the process that you want to automate, in this case, phishing. You're going to break it into individual steps, and you're going to decide which of the action types in Tines is best suited to perform that step. Simple as that. Now, the critical thing about Tines is there's actually only 7 action types, regardless of what you're automating. So it doesn't matter if you're automating phishing response, it doesn't matter if you're automating vuln management, security Slack bots. Everything that you build is always just a different combination of these 7 action types. So think about these as like the primitives of Tines. Every workflow that you build is just going to be a different combination of these 7 things configured in slightly different ways. What that means is that once you know how to configure these 7 things, and that takes about 3 hours, you have all the knowledge that you will need to automate any process. So although we're going to look at phishing today, and we'll look at another couple in a few minutes, it doesn't really matter what we actually demonstrate, because again, it's always the same moving parts, just configured and connected in slightly different ways. So for this phishing response workflow, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a receive email action. And that receive email action, one of the 7 action types, as you can probably guess, is used to receive emails. In this case, phishing emails reported by our employees, by our customers, or by a tool like KnowBe4 or Material or something like that.
So you can either rig that up to pull from an inbox which receives phishing reports, for example.
Absolutely right. And the cool thing about Tines is this storyboard here is completely flexible. So if you've used tools before, like, Visio or OmniGraffle or Miro or something like that, this will feel really familiar. So literally all you do is you drag an action onto the storyboard, you drop it in, and you configure it, right? And the configuration is over here. You say, hey, what do you want to call it? And that's really it. You've got a description if you want it, etc. And then you connect these guys up to different things. So again, very, very simple, easy to use. Again, if you've used a whiteboarding application or something similar, this will feel very comfortable, very normal, very familiar. So back to our workflow here. Let me just get rid of these toolbars. What we're doing is we're receiving the emails in our first step. That's all this action does. It receives the emails and it says, I've got a new email. It then passes the email to the next 2 actions in the story. In this case, explode attachments and extract URLs. So if you think about what we'd be doing in a manual world, we'd want to pull out any types of indicators from the email. So we'd want to look at the URLs, we'd want to look at the attachments and various sandboxes, etc., etc. What you'll notice here is that these things are happening at the same time. Right, so there is an unlimited number of parallelism that you can apply in Tines. So if you want to do more things in parallel, that's totally fine as well. But in this case, we're just going to explode the attachments and we're going to extract the URLs. Once we have the URLs, we'll do some more interesting things, like we'll analyze the URLs in VirusTotal, we'll submit them to URL scan, and we can even, if we wanted, to do something like check out, record a future. Recorded.
So you can basically, like when you say submit it to the VirusTotal or whatever, like that's through one of those blocks is doing like an API call, right? Like send out an API call, get a response, kick it into the next thing.
100%. And this is the cool thing about Tines, in that because it's only ever these 7 action types, one of those action types is a HTTP request action that you'll use to talk to any external tool. So any tool that has an API, regardless of whether it's VirusTotal, URL Scan, Record a Future, RiskIQ, Microsoft, Google, we'll treat all those tools the exact same way. So in that case, we're never going to be the bottleneck for your automation. Other platforms will require some sort of pre-built integration for you to talk to those tools, but we just rely on the bare APIs to perform the automation.
Yep.
Okay, so again, it doesn't matter if we're using VirusTotal or URL Scan or Record a Future. It'll all work the exact same way. Although you can, if you wanted, use a basic HTTP request action and configure it from scratch, as you saw, we do have all these action templates. And these are like, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of pre-configured actions that allow you to perform activities commonly performed by security teams. So for example, if you wanted to do something in Alien Vault, you'd have an action that's pre-configured to do that, to reach out to the Alien Vault API. You don't have to use them, but they're there if you want to. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is, after we have those results from URL scan and VirusTotal and any other number of systems that we want, we're going to start making decisions on whether or not the URLs are malicious or represent a threat. And there's a few different ways you can do that. But critically, what you're going to do is you're going to combine the information from one or a number of sources. So we're going to check the results from URL scan. We're going to check the results from VirusTotal. We're going to check the results from any number of systems and configure a rule that aligns to our risk posture for our organization. So critically, we're not going to say, this is the rule that's going to tell you if a URL is malicious. Instead, we're going to let you do that. So you might say, you know what, if even one engine in VirusTotal says this is malicious, I want to consider this a threat. Or you might say, you know what, I'm a little bit more forgiving. I'm going to say I require 6 engines in VirusTotal, and I require URL scan, and I require recorded future. But again, it's all completely configurable to the user. Okay. So once we have decided that, hey, yes, this is malicious, this is not malicious, we're going to go and start creating tickets or, cases in some case. And the way you do that in Tines is you use the external system for which you're most comfortable. So if your organization is a Jira shop, awesome, use Jira. If your organization is a ServiceNow shop, awesome, use ServiceNow. If you want to pump these things into Slack, do that. But we're not going to make you sit inside our platform to triage alerts, right? I think that's one of the critical differences about Tines is we encourage our users to use the systems and tools that they already have where they're already doing their work. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about how all these actions are configured. We're going to do some additional pivot searches here using a SIEM. We're going to find some more information using an IDP.
Well, that's a hell of a one to gloss over, right? Which is the part where it's actually querying the SIEM.
Oh, yeah. So,
and then we're going to do this really, really hard, good to do thing. And then anyway, we'll not talk about that. Sorry, I'm going to have to pull you up on that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great call out. So I think, again, the way we treat SIEM, right, whether it's Splunk, Elastic, Datadog, McAfee, QRadar, is the exact same way as we treat any tool in your stack. Right. And this is the beautiful thing about Tines is that as an analyst, to do this manually, you would have to go and copy the URL and you'd have to go into your SIEM. You'd have to paste it in. You'd have to pick the time range. You'd have to press go. You'd have to wait, 10 seconds to 10 minutes for the results to come back. You'd copy those results into your case and you'd make a decision with, okay, there's hits or there isn't hit and triage it from here. With Tines, it's just simply another box on the screen. Right, so if it was Splunk, you would do Splunk search, and you would find create a search in Splunk Enterprise. You would drop it on here. You would connect it up. Oops. And you would configure the search to be whatever search you want. Right, so here...
What sort of searches are you going to be doing through your SIEM as part of phishing response? I mean, forgive me because I'm not a practitioner, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned that. So one of the things you'll want to do is if you find that a user in your environment has received a malicious URL, what you'll want to do is check if anybody else has received that URL, or worse, if they've clicked it. Or worse,
so you want to see if there's an outbound DNS lookup for that URL.
Bingo, outbound DNS, or some sort of credential stuffing behavior, you name it. But you'll want to search across that. The cool thing about automation, Patrick, is that in a manual investigation, you're always trying to reduce the amount of work to the bare minimum required because you've got 10 more tickets waiting for your attention. But with
and
time,
you might not exhaust all steps either, right? You just might go, okay, well, that, okay, whatever,
Yeah,
so this way you can be exhaustive every time, even when it's menial. And when it's menial is when you skip stuff.
Exactly right. And you have the advantage of going as deep or as shallow as you want. Because as an incident responder, you're constantly trying to balance that depthness of investigation with like time crunch. So you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to call this because I'm pretty sure this isn't malicious, and I'll move on to the next one. But with automation, you can do the 20, 30, 40, 50 steps that are dictated by best practice, let the automation platform do all the work, and then quickly eyeball the results if necessary, or perform the automation remediation as well.
Well, and after you've had a bunch of those results come in, you might start tuning those based on the results you're getting as well, right? So, yeah.
And in fact, you should be tuning it. One of the complaints that you'll often hear from security teams is that like, oh, these alerts stink, but I don't have the time to actually tune the alerts because I'm too inundated with alerts or vulnerabilities or whatever it is.
Yeah, we got this alert, but because of this thing and this thing that we just looked into, it's probably nothing, right? So you automate that, you spend less time chasing dead ends. Yeah, I get it. Anyway, sorry for the diversion through Simland. I just thought that was an interesting one to talk about.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess we kind of take these things for granted, Patrick, if I'm being completely honest. But you're absolutely right to point it out that this is probably a step that's going to save an analyst 20 minutes per alert, right?
Yeah,
and we just kind of like, we'll just drag this on and drop it in. And what's really cool about Tines is if I wanted, for this alert here, right, search SIM for malicious visits, one of the things that I can do is I can add a report that says, for this step here, this should take me 20 minutes, right? And now, every single time that this runs, Tines is going to collect all the time that you're saving, so you can look proudly back upon this and say, cool, for all these phishing emails, I've saved X amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, we'll do some more great things, like we'll log the victim out of the account automatically, we'll lock the account, we'll update the ticket, we'll isolate assets if necessary, etc., etc. Again, it's not that important what we're doing here because Tines is going to be flexible enough to work for whatever your process is, whatever your exact mode of operation wants to be. But what I do want to do is really quickly show you what actually happens under the hood when we receive a phishing email or when a user reports a phishing email. So in Tines, every action can run in a few different ways. Sorry, I'm just sending myself a malicious email over my other monitor. Every action can operate in a few different ways. So, you can run a story, a workflow on a schedule. So I can say, run this action every, day at 9 a.m. Or, every 5 minutes. Or if I'm feeling really gnarly, I can input my own cron schedule. Or you can actually just run these things completely manually, which is what I'm going to do here. So here, we'll see, when I press run, these actions begin to emit events. And this is what the numbers, the little badges represent here. So if we go here, we can see that this guy has emitted an event. And an event is the result of an action running. And I can view those by clicking here. Now remember, this action had one job. Every action in Tines has one job. This guy's job was to receive the email. That's it. Really simple, really atomic. And that email contains all the stuff that you would expect to contain, right? Who was sent from, the subject of the email, the date, whether there was any attachments, full headers. So if I want to do like fun MOTAD analysis, I can do that. The body of the email, etc., etc. But that's it. That's all this little block did. It just received the email. When it's finished, it says, okay, I've got the email. That's my job done. It passes that event to the next two actions in the story. This guy and this guy here. And those guys recognize, okay, I've got an event. Now it's my turn to do my job. And if we look at the event...
And it might be strip URLs, and another one might be strip attachments and kick them into this sandbox. Or I get it.
Absolutely. All you're doing is you're breaking your process into small steps, just like you would do on a conveyor belt. Breaking it into these small steps, which makes it easy to understand, easy to build, easy to troubleshoot, etc. And so if we look at the event that this guy's admitted, this one was configured to find all the URLs in the body of the email so we could analyze them later. We'll see that it contains a couple of interesting things. Firstly, it contains the URLs, right? So this action has done its job. It's found all the URLs in the body of that email. In this case, it looks like a popped WordPress site. In addition, it also contains the email. And this is really important and subtle, but very critical. So let me pause on it for just one sec. So
take a sip. Come on, mate. Got to be hydrated for these sort of things. I'm going to do the same.
It's that important. I needed to quench my palate or quench my thirst. Okay, so every action type in Tines, all 7 action types work the exact same way. When they run, the event that they emit contains their action, in this case the URLs, and the result of every action up to that point in the workflow. Now that's not too impressive here because it's just 2, right? It's got the email and the URLs. But if we go further down this workflow to lock victim account, and we look at this event, we'll see that in a really, really short space of time, Tines has collected all this valuable context and is making it available to every action in the story, in the workflow. So regardless of how many actions you have, how many steps you have in the workflow, all you're doing is snowballing context. So you're collecting more information, more information, more information, more information. And then you can use all that information to make more accurate, more high fidelity, more easier to understand, more enriched tickets.
So I'd imagine like towards the end, you've got an action which takes, that just basically does some operations on all of the information and, you can get it to spit out a score or something like that.
Totally. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that there's really no limit to the number of these steps that you can have. And that's why we see our customers build things like this, right? Where you're collecting all this information. But the amazing part is that this doesn't really break down because it's only ever those 7 action types. Yeah. And once you know how to configure one thing, you know how to configure everything. Okay. I think you've got the core concepts now, man. Any questions?
No. I mean, it's all pretty clear, right? I mean, I guess the question would be like, if you flash us towards the end and show us what sort of ticket it spits out, right? Because that's to me the interesting bit. Like, are you generating tickets for stuff that, your workflows have determined are not a big deal? Or are you just creating tickets for the big deal stuff? Or how does that part of it work?
So again, we're pretty...
Because I'd imagine you want some record of the stuff that turns out to be nothing in case it turns out to be something later. And,
Absolutely. Yeah, let me show you that in the context of another category of workflow, because I think it'll be a little bit more interesting. So now
this is the AWS one, right? Because we spoke before we started started on this, and that was another one you were going to show us.
So we see our customers use Tines with AWS a lot, right? A lot of our customers are using Tines to interact with the various different systems that AWS provides, whether it's...
Do you mean you've actually come up with something that helps people make CloudTrail useful?
Hey, look, we're not magicians, Patrick, but we're trying. But yes, we have a lot of customers that will use Tines with CloudTrail, with GuardDuty, with Athena, with Route 66, you name it.
And I should say too, that's just a joke that like for most people it's hard. Like there's plenty of people out there getting value out of that stuff, but it's hard. It's hard if you don't know it well, right?
Totally. And to get to a stage where you've hammered your CloudTrail logs and configurations into usefulness, that's an extraordinary commitment up front. Right? You have to spend a lot of time before you begin to see value. So there's upfront investment before you even get there. And so one of the things that we do at Tines to try and reduce that amount of upfront investment that you want is we provide a lot of out-of-the-box workflows for things like AWS. So you'll see over here, we've got this thing called a story library. And if we click that, we'll see all the various pre-built workflows that we have. So you'll see there's 333 tags here, various levels, various tools, various techniques. So if I search for something like CrowdStrike, I'll see all the various workflows that we've created to allow people to get started really, really quickly with CrowdStrike. Because one of the things we'll often hear from our customers is, this is amazing, I love this, I want this, but I don't really know how to get started, and I'm not sure I even have the time to go and actually like build my first workflow from scratch. So the story library allows these people allows anyone get started really, really quickly. So if I was to go to, AWS, for example, here I'd find all the various different AWS workflows that are pre-built. And it's not just AWS, it's AWS and Panther, it's AWS and Lacework, it's AWS and, Wiz, for example. It's all these various tools working in concert with AWS. But this...
So maybe less about taking raw logs and maybe taking alerts from the security companies that have already done some processing on those alerts and figured out something's up.
Exactly.
Which makes sense, because I was trying to imagine, actually, I made that joke about CloudTrail,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, well, you can't really throw all of your CloudTrail logs at an automation solution, because that, that's a dumb idea. But yeah, no, okay, this makes sense.
Totally. And I think as well, we've accidentally brushed up against a really important topic, which is when is the right time to buy Tines? And we try to be really upfront with our customers. There's a point along your journey as a security program where automation makes a heap of sense. For a lot of companies, that will be day zero. Hey, look, we want to use automation as our foundation for everything else we'll do in the months and years to come. But for other companies, they'll be like, no, we're 100% AWS. All we care about is AWS. And so they'll probably want some sort of cloud native SIEM or cloud security posture management platform first, and then they might want to augment that with automation. But we're not going to say to our customers, look, buy Tines, it's the perfect solution for every time. It's just not, right? There's a certain time where it does make sense. And we'll typically start when we're talking to a customer or working with a customer. That's usually what we'll do, is we'll figure out what part of the journey that they're on and make sure that we can add value at that point. Okay. Alrighty, cool. Oh, sorry, excuse me. So this workflow here is an example of an AWS workflow. So again, it's just these same 7 action types configured in slightly different ways, right? It's the same colors. But here what we're doing is we're receiving guard duty alerts. We're checking if that detection from guard duty involves an instance. We're going to use a HTTP request directly to CloudTrail. We're not talking to a SIEM here. As you can see, we're going straight to CloudTrail, and we're saying, hey, give us the CloudTrail logs that relate to this particular guard duty detection. We're going to do some additional work. We're going to make a decision whether it's a network connection or a DNS request. Then we're going to do some IP enrichment, domain enrichment, and then we'll go create a Jira ticket. Right. Again.
Okay. Well, this makes sense that you're using CloudTrail to actually provide the context rather than the origin point for the action, right? Which would get clogged up pretty quick. Okay. So yeah, I'm with you now.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is we're saying, let's just use native AWS technologies. We'll turn on guard duty, we'll fetch the relevant logs, and then we'll enrich it using various other tools like Grey Noise and Virus Total and URL Scan, et cetera, et cetera.
Man, I was actually going to ask about Grey Noise because, I can imagine that when you've got an automation solution, that's when stuff like Grey Noise actually becomes even more useful, right? Even more useful than, analysts being able to pull in their context into a workflow. Like, just being able to have that as part of Tines would be great. That's what it's for, like it would be at its best when plugged into an automation solution. Anyway.
Right. And so you'll see, for example, we have a ton of pre-built workflows that are related to Grey Noise just because our customers use it a ton. And we were talking about Canary tools a second ago as well. Like, all these systems play so neatly with the product. Okay. So now, similar story here, right? Every single action on this workflow is just doing a tiny piece of the puzzle. It's collecting more and more and more and more context. As you rightly pointed out at the start of this conversation, CloudTrail is really noisy. So there's going to be a lot of data here. So if we go and we look at the event that Tine has by the time it gets to create a Jira ticket, we'll see that although there's not that many kind of high level pieces of information, if we expand all that, we've got a lot of information. Oops, let me scroll down here. Right, we have got tons of info, right? And as a security analyst, you're not expected to go and pick through all of this. So what we will do is we'll go and create a Jira ticket that just contains the important information, right? And so what we'll do is, let's open one of these. tickets here.
And does the ticket contain some sort of URL into Tines where you click it and it pulls up the incident and all of that info? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely right. And you can go forward and backward and so on and so forth. You can even do cool things in Tines, like, for example, you can say, look, here's the information that we're creating. But again, this is all going to be completely configurable, right? If you want additional information, if you wanted to add screenshots from like a potentially malicious landing page, etc., you could do all that as well. This is just for the ones that we created tickets for, though, right? To your point, you're not going to want to create a ticket for every single alerts that are received from guard duty. There could be tens of thousands a day. And this is where we have a feature called spotlights. And so you saw just how much information was in these alerts, right? It's an absolute ton. What Spotlights allows us to do as the user is define which information is important to us. So it could be the AWS account, it could be the Jira ticket that was created, it could be the results of the search against grey noise, and we allow you to build that in a very, very easy to use report. So if I go back to AWS here, and I click on reports, and I go AWS alerts, what I can see here is I've got this information in a very easy to see table. So I can see exactly the AWS account, the region, the duration, the external ticket that was created, who the user was that associated with it, the number of time that was saved, etc. But there's no real limit to the amount of rows you can have in this table. And if you want, you can always pop back and say, okay, these were all the spotlights. I actually want to see the raw data. And so you can say, okay, well, show me the actual CloudTrail search results that came back. And you can do all that to get all those CloudTrail alerts, see the raw data, and configure it any which way you want.
Yeah, so instead of just getting a guard duty alert and then having to kick off an investigation every time, everything you need is in a URL that's attached to the ticket.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, which
Absolutely
means,
right.
You're still probably going to have to, click through on a lot of them that turn out to be nothing, but you're not doing the legwork, and eventually you can tune out some of those dead ends as well.
Yep. Bingo.
Yeah.
So to wrap us up then, let's talk about how you can take these workflows to the next level. And that's when you convert a workflow to an app. So what we've been building for the first few years, or what we were building for the first few years, was this super, super powerful workflow engine, right? One that was really easy to use, only required knowledge of these 7 things, and could work with any technology. That platform worked really, really well when it was machine-to-machine systems, and maybe a little bit of human interaction. But mostly it worked when something happened externally. Tines would kick into some systematic workflow and perform some sort of automated remediation. What we've learned throughout this journey is that automation is the utility of automation is dramatically improved when humans are involved. Whether that's when they inject interruption at some point, when they're reviewing, and of course when they're building. So let's imagine we have this workflow here, right? So we've detected that a malicious instance or that an instance is reaching out to a known bad DNS, right? Or a known bad domain using a DNS request. Sure, it's cool to create the Jira issue, but what we'd really like to do is automatically delete that instance or automatically change the security group, etc. We probably don't want to do that without first alerting this instance owner, right? This could be something really critical. It could be something completely trivial. We don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, you had me clenching a little there, man. I got to be honest. When you're talking about nuking instances and stuff like automatically,
Totally.
But yeah, you at least want to throw a y/n prompt at the person who owns the instance.
Right. And, it's not just these type of cases, right? It can be anything from like somebody's connected to the VPN from an unknown location, right? You'd really want to verify that before you terminate it.
Yeah.
Or somebody has changed their password, whatever. And we call this entire process distributed decisions. Right. This is where, as part of your security workflow, you're involving some other user within your organization or within the public. And so with Tines, there's no real way to do that using these 7 action types, right? The 7 action types are your programming logic, so to speak. But what you can do is you can add this thing that we call a page. So let's say after we create a Jira ticket, we want to go and create a web page. So all we would do is we would drop the page on, just like we do with every other. Oh. And we connect it up. And we can double click this and we can build a really nice all singing, all dancing web page, right? So we can have things like input fields like text boxes. We can add date fields. We can include output elements like maps, for example. We can add images. And we can use this to either collect information from the user, as in, hey, did you just log in from China? Or give them back information related to the context that we've already collected. So for example,
can you authenticate that the user, like I understand that you might distribute this via email or whatever to a user, but can you, can you tie that to their auth so that you know that the only person who's hitting that page is the author? Authenticated
100%.
user.
So you can do things like, hey, this should be viewed by public. It should be viewed by like anyone with a link. You can turn on SSL or SSO, you name it. Okay.
Yep. So you've got SSO integration into that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
That's cool. Yeah.
Okay, so let's show you.
So then you can have stuff like, hey, instance owner, and you know it's them. Press this button to nuke this. I see immediately where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yeah, you get it. So let's what I'm going to do is I'm going to restore a previous version here that kind of has a more complete example rather than trying to build it on the fly. So the other thing about Tines is we're obviously keeping full version control. We are full version history. We've got change control enabled if you want it. So let me find this one here. And this one contains an app. So I'm just going to restore this version. All right. So this is going to be the exact same workflow. Right, exact same thing, except however, after creating the ticket in Jira, we're going to send an email to the user with a link to a page, with a link to an app. We're going to geolocate the IP address that we found from the CloudTrail logs. We're going to generate map coordinates and we're going to show them a map when they click it. Right, so let me give you an example. So let's do a DNS request with a malicious domain.
Sorry to interrupt your flow here, but you could also have a page, you could generate a page that would have multiple different choices, right? So you could, email an admin and say, well, do you want to shut this instance down? Do you want to just shut this service down? Do you want to add this rule? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that, right? So that's
bingo.
Being able to actually put those options in front of in front of anyone in the org, integrated with SSO. Sorry, I like this. This is cool.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful because you're right. It just opens up a whole new world of use cases that go way beyond what you typically expect from like a SOAR platform, right?
Yeah.
So I've got this URL. I'm going to open this URL, and this URL can be in an email, in a Slack message, in a PagerDuty, in a text message, you name it. But when you click it, what's going to happen is the user will visit this link, and it'll show them all this cool information. And you can configure this to have a logo. You can change this to your company name, like tines.companyname.com. It's going to show you where the IP address was, etc., etc. And you can say, was this expected behavior? And if you don't get a response in a particular amount of time, you can escalate, right? You can say, hey, this user hasn't responded, so we're going to automatically email their boss with this same link, but containing different information. If there's no response there, maybe then we'll nuke the instance, whatever. But depending on what one I click, whether it's yes or whether it's no, it's going to go back to here, and it's going to be behavior recognized, behavior not recognized. So it's combining this back-end automation with this front-end automation to create these fully featured applications. So I'm going to say, yeah, that was expected behavior, whatever, totally fine. And then Tines will continue on its merry way. Which one was it? It was this one. And it'll go, okay, behavior recognized, and we'll go and add an issue to the Jira comment. So the user has confirmed that this was expected, etc., etc. And now we can even probably go back to our report, our Spotlight report, which is, where are we, reports?
And it kind of reminds me, I think I've seen some, services from like Apple that'll do stuff like that, right? So bringing that sort of level of functionality that, probably a dev team there banged their heads against a wall trying to build 100%. That, and then you just did it here for enterprise.
And the really cool thing about this as well is, security people, if a security person knows how to write code, it's typically they know how to hack together a little bit of Python or a little bit of Bash or JavaScript or PowerShell or something like that. They're not web application designers. but they have a
Yeah.
absolute requirement to do it. Whether it's to build little mini apps for sweeping through their logs, whether it's to do stuff like that, distributed decision making.
No, I
And
get it. I mean, they can do it, but will it be reliable? Will it be
secure, scalable,
yeah,
maintainable? Exactly right. Exactly
yeah,
right.
usable?
Bingo. And so you can do, for pages, you can do all kinds of or like apps, you can do all kinds of cool things. Like you can build authorization pages. So for example, if you want to build a tool access request form, you can fill out your details. Science.com, CEO, reason I need it. And you can say, hey, I want access to CrowdStrike and Elastic, and the approver is going to be Eoin plus approver.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me like one thing CMD did, and they made a Linux tool that would like restrict commands and add authorizations to them. I mean, eventually they turned more into Linux EDR and now they're part of Elastic. But one cool thing they had as part of their early product was you could actually, set up certain commands had to be approved by an administrator, and they actually plumbed that through to Duo Push, which was very cool, right? So if you're adminning a Linux box and one of your users is trying to run some risky command, you get a pop-up saying, do you want to let them do it? And you can just hit no, which is nice. Are you planning some mobile app sort of integrations for things like that, or?
Oh, never say never. I think
I guess you don't really need to when you can just click through, to
yeah. So what we would typically do is, rather than building that from scratch ourselves, because we play so nicely with the tools that you already have in your stack, we'd either have that in like Slack or Teams as like a yes, no, or like an Okta Verify or a Duo, for example. And then just use that as another piece of context for your workflow. Yep, the user has approved, do this. No, the user said no, reject it.
No, I get it. Why have a mobile app when you can plumb it through into a Slack bot? I get it.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's applications, man. We're seeing our customers build some really, really fun stuff with it, whether it's self-service security portals, whether it's things like this for approval statuses, whether it's their own little mini tools for just expediting their own internal workflows. People are having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, how long's this been out?
So we shipped this last month. It's been in beta for a while, but we shipped it into all our customers' hands. All our free users got this last month.
Because I remember a big use case for you, and we've spoken about this before, was that ability to contact a user and say, did you log in from X? Previously, was that something where an administrator would actually have to do that by sending an email or getting on the phone, right? And that's kind of why you built this?
And not just to do that, like that was literally only a yes-no option, whereas here you can have any option. You can build like true apps. If you think about what we did there, what you're describing is a feature that we had called prompts. And really all it did was allow you to interrupt a workflow for a yes-no decision, whereas apps allows you to create these really rich, engaging, fully featured web applications.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's interesting. And what do you do in the situation where, if there's a successful login from, say, China, Russia, let's just pick the scary countries for a second, you email off that link. I mean, what's to stop an attacker clicking on that link and then saying, yep, it was me? Is there any, what do you do? Because I imagine that would be something people would think about with that workflow, and I'm just personally curious.
Oh, no, it's a great one. And it's something that we think about all the time. So again, we're going to be really unopinionated about that. But if, for example, what we would recommend is, hey, look, behavior is recognized. So for example, the user has said, yes, that's me. They've got access to the user's email. What we would do then is we would say, okay, perfect. Thanks for that. We're also going to send you like a Duo push, right?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask is like, could you plumb this through to Twilio or something and actually send them that URL via SMS?
You could, but the critical thing is, you're going to want to add a second factor that's different to the first factor. So here we're using, we're sending it the email to the end user. So what you would want to do is use some sort of different channel. So in this case, we'd use like Duo push.
No, I get it. So once they click yes, it's not like, oh, okay, that's all honky-dory. Once they click yes, then there's that step up authentication to confirm. And do you build that into the app flow?
Yeah, totally. So for example, instead here what we're doing is we're saying the user said, yes, that's fine. We're going to add a comment to Jira, right? So what we would do instead, he would say, okay, what we're going to do? We're actually going to send a alert via Duo. Or, to your point, let's use Twilio. And let's send a make a call, send a customer, send a text message to Twilio, right? So all we would do is we would drop that in, and instead of creating the ticket straight away, we'd connect that to Twilio. We'd bring this over here. And now we're sending the message to Twilio, and we can decide then if the user clicks yes in the Twilio message, then we can add the Jira as well. So it's like, okay, cool, thanks for your double confirmation. But if they say no to Twilio, all we would do is we'd come back here and we go back to behavior not recognized.
Nice.
Simple as that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm really glad that I asked you that, because we got to see how easy it is to actually adjust these apps, which is very pointy clicky, very cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the real beauty of it. And there's often this kind of almost anti-intuitive phenomenon where you would expect, if you know how to write code and you're a developer, that you wouldn't want to use this kind of like pointy clicky drag and drop. But we actually see the opposite. We see users who are hardcore engineers really embrace this, because as you know, the 10x engineer doesn't really care about the technology or the stack. All they care is about the outcome and how quickly they can get there. And so they're seeing Tines as a way to just move faster through whatever it is they're trying to accomplish.
I actually worked at it, this will sound strange, but, in the 90s, I did my degree in electronics engineering, and there was actually a circuit simulator as part of my digital signal processing training, where it was kind of reminds me of this, where you'd pull in like a signal generator. And you could say it's a sine wave, it's a square wave, it's an impulse generator, it does white noise across this spectrum, what's the frequency, what's the amplitude, and then you'd plug it into filters and things like that. You could add probes and, so this is an interface type that's not new, but actually being able to do reliable automation with it, having all of those integrations there. And I guess these days it's easier to do this because, we live in a very API world, right?
Bingo.
So,
Yep.
Yeah,
that's so funny that you mentioned that, because my first degree was in EE as well. So I used those same PCB designers and circuit design tools. And now you have me thinking, was that the subconscious inspiration for Tines?
Has that influence? So this one wasn't a PCB designer. It was a DSP simulator. Which you would literally have blocks, which some would generate signals, others would filter them, and things like that. And you could put probes to observe what was happening at various points in the system. But probably I'm going to say that you have been influenced. No,
I would say you're right, man. It's amazing the things that you, or the technologies that you touched that you forgot about, but still had an important kind of like influence on your career.
Yeah, it's the stuff you pick up along the way. All right, Eoin Hinchy, thank you so much for joining us for part of this demo. Really cool demo. Like, we went massively longer than we were expecting, but that's fine, because it did not drag. You've got to show us a bunch of cool stuff, and I think I think a lot of people watching this will be interested to give it a go. Maybe dip their toe in for one use case, whether that's phishing automation or whatever. But you've certainly shown us that, you can do some very useful stuff with Tines. Thanks again.
Thank you, my friend. Talk soon.